I broke my back.
What do you mean by that?
My back is broken.
What do you mean, calm it down? It's a fight. Referees telling two fighters who want to fight to calm it down? He should calm down.
I saw he's like a clown in his show, man. He's not your guy.
Because Tyson Fury's back, and all you motherfuckers are under attack. Look, Eddie Hearn can say all what he likes. Who gives a shit what Eddie Hearn says? It's garbage.
Are you off your tits? Have you been smoking something?
Can you let me retire and be happy? Please, just please.
Bombs away from the Bronx Bomber!
Wanda! Let's go, baby! Let's go! I'm through. They put somebody else up and give me an interview. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? You never give me a fair shake. HBO needs to fire you. You don't know shit about boxing. You ain't shit. You're not shit. I wish I was 50 years younger and I'd kick your ass.
I got dropped, man. Are you kidding?
No, you won the fight.
OMG. I am so excited.
Yes. What is up, MCR family? Another semi-daily, weekly edition of the show. Sorry, I was on a little mini vacation, but I'm back. Air horns since I'm back here. I'm relaxed. I'm all good. Too bad Rob's not here to see the new me that's all relaxed and calm. You know, it's gonna be us talking about fights that aren't happening. Irish cartels. Fun show today. Should be a good one. I'm Matt, the Hipster Hunter. Find me, Matt Hunter, MCR on all social media platforms. Hit the like button, all that YouTube shit. And like I said, we're going to be talking all things boxing today. Also might be talking about UFC 249 in terms of how it affects the boxing world, because there's a little bit of a bleed effect in terms of regulation and obviously promoters taking cues from other promoters in combat sports. But without further ado, let me get to my co-host on today's show, the one and only Gary in Dallas. Gary, how are you, man?
Good. It's really good to be back. We've been gone for a while. It's good to see you refreshed. It's going to be a fun show today. That's why I wish Robbie was here. We have to do the Irish cartel show without Rob.
For safety reasons, of course.
We don't want anyone to be an accessory after the fact.
I'm going to make way too many jokes. I think I get way too uncomfortable during the show about that, but it's just how I'm going to have to deal with it. My defense mechanism.
Both stocks I gave Robbie yesterday were up today. Did you watch that? EGO and SILV on the New York Stock Exchange were both up today.
Yeah, I was watching CNBC, man.
You were, right?
No, I wasn't.
You were not.
On my vacation? Hell no. No, come on. But let's get to some boxing topics, because we do have a lot of topics to get to, Gary. We have Deontay Wilder, Fury, AJ Pulev step aside situation to get to as well. Steven Espinoza, Dana White beefing, and obviously all the fun stuff that we can talk about with that. Top Rank back. World Championship Boxing is back in the U.S. In July in Las Vegas. We're going to talk about that. Gervonta Davis, Leo Santa Cruz in the fall. Ryan Garcia going on social media for the last few days, apparently, and deciding that he wants to tweet at everyone in combat sports that's around his weight class and talk shit. Good for him. It gives us content. But let's get to the Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, AJ situation, debacle, whatever we want to say. I don't know why you just went away like that, Gary. What happened? You're back. That was weird. But digressing, should Deontay Wilder step aside for Fury? Joshua, this was an article from Lance Pugmire. We're not going to really step into that argument. But in terms of the detail it gives here, Wilder's requirement would be a windfall payment, rumored to be a record $10 million, accompanied by a guarantee to meet Fury Joshua winner in 2021. That's what Lance Pugmire is writing in terms of what he's been hearing. Though Bob Arum is saying that the money to pay these two guys is just ludicrous. The idea of where we're going to find that money, and to read sort of an excerpt from what he has been saying. Talk about paying Wilder or paying Pulev step-aside money is at this point ludicrous, Arum told co-hosts Jerry Cooney and Randy Gordon. I think they're on SiriusXM, I believe. Yes, SiriusXM's at the fights. We are not the United States Mint that can print money and distribute it. $2 trillion or, money, hard to imagine. We can't do that. Who's going to pay the step-aside money? Where's it coming from? It's nice to say, hey, pay step-aside money, but who the hell is going to pay it, right? So, let's look forward to Fury Wilder fight and a Joshua Pulev fight. Gary, thoughts on this continuing story about Fury Wilder and Joshua Pulev paying their respective parties step aside money to have this fight in the Middle East somewhere, as it's been talked about?
Well, from what I understand is that Bob Arum can't pay anyone step aside money because Dana White told me he's broke.
That's true. Yes. And Dana White's always correct.
Always. No bias. Endover's not in any financial trouble at all. They didn't take on a loan they probably can never pay back. None of that happened.
They can maybe pay that back. Hey, come on.
I don't know Endover like you do. What else do they have? I mean, we're not making movies now. We're not, UFC.
Endeavor. I mean, I bet they're still making some residuals, obviously, off of past content to some degree, but they're not going to make $260 million back on that loan plus interest.
Didn't they say it was 11% interest? Was that someone else?
I didn't see that.
Okay.
All right, at least I don't remember that. If that's 11% interest, oh my fucking God. But digressing from that point, I do believe that if like things are back to normal, let's say normal in a year or two, and we start making movies and TV shows and having sports entertainment again, so to speak, Endeavor can pay that back. And also, if whenever they do launch an IPO, maybe they pay that back that way as well. Just pointing it out there. But they have a lot of debt. They've obviously taken a lot of debt in the past few years. But
I don't know how you're going to IPO, like how you think you're going to open up well when you just took on a $260 million loan. I mean, that might keep
it may hurt. It may hurt. Yeah, maybe, perhaps, Gary. I'm not the financial expert like you.
But you also do have some common sense, right?
Yeah, but digressing back to the idea of a step aside sort of check to both Deontay Wilder and Pulev. Thoughts on that happening, not happening? I mean, I'm of the opinion that this doesn't happen and we may not even get these two respective fights to some degree. Like, we're probably going to get Joshua Pulev because that's easier to make in my mind than Wilder Fury, just from a logistics standpoint. But we could perhaps not even see a Tyson Fury Deontay Wilder trilogy fight this year, and we could see them take respective tune-ups this year. That's 100% possible. Not 100%, obviously, but it's very likely at this point that we could see that with the way promoters, their respective promoters, have been talking. So I don't believe we're going to see any step-aside money. I believe it's at this point probably a little bit ridiculous to keep talking about it as if it's going to happen. And the talks about, and we're going to get to, the Kinahan and all of those situations with MTK and the talks in the Middle East later on the show. But those talks, obviously, about a future date for a future fight between these two, speaking of Fury and AJ, that's not next. And we can probably just move on from talking about these guys taking a record $10 million step-aside check. That's probably not going to happen. Again, in this age where everyone's hurting, right? ESPN's down 40% in terms of viewership. Everyone's hurting across the board. How are they all of a sudden going to find this extra money to pay these record step-aside fees to make this fight happen in an expedited nature? Just don't see it happening. Gary, your thoughts on the step-aside money here?
I don't think ESPN or Disney will pay $10 million. Like, I don't think that's going to come, and I don't think Top Rank's in a position right now where they can pay $10 million. So I don't think it's going to come from the promoter or from the network. That seems like a lot. I said 5 he should do it. 10, it's a no-brainer to me that Wilder should step aside and take $10 million and then go fight Helenius for 5, and you just made $15 million, right? In essence, to go fight Robert Helenius. It'd be crazy not to.
You don't even need a fight if you don't want to. You could just train for that time if you can take the $10 million, right? Like, in theory, like, if you don't want to take a tune-up and risk taking an L, just train. You have this new team you're talking about. Take that year off or whatever to train with them. I'm okay with that.
I am, but I think that PBC and the networks, whether it be Fox or Showtime, would want him to fight again because it would be, if he fought Helenius, he'd be on network television and it would do a good rating. I don't know if it would do over 1 million, but it might. It's Wilder.
Wait, over on network television, it would do over 2.
On network television, on Fox, it would do over 2. On Showtime, do you think it would do 1? Maybe.
He was
around 1. Yeah.
Gary, drop in and out for a second. You're a ton of echo on your end.
Okay.
I don't know what's happening. But I think he was always around that million figure, speaking of Deontay Wilder. So if he was fighting Helenius on Showtime, yeah, that would do very good numbers, let's be honest. But that's really beside the point. I think that if again, it's not happening. But if Deontay Wilder was to get a $10 million check and he was to accept it and take the step aside, I wouldn't focus on fighting someone right now. I would focus on training and working on polishing up your game. And yes, obviously, tune-up fights do help that. It's a way to live practice that to a degree that sparring doesn't really emulate. But I don't think Deontay Wilder needs 2 or 3 tune-ups with a new regimen to see how he works. I think he just needs a year off to figure out a game plan for Fury and to shore up his technical flaws to achieve said game plan. But beside that point, I still don't think this $10 million check is going to happen. And then you have to imagine whatever Pulev is going to be asking, and it's probably around $5 million. It's probably close to Deontay Wilder's purse to some degree because he's fighting AJ, a much more lucrative fight, so to speak, than a plain Tyson Fury fight on average. Maybe not a specific Fury Wilder fight though. Gary's back. Gary, how are you, man?
Good.
Gary.
Yeah.
Hi.
How
Hi,
are you?
I'm good, man. Anyways, any more thoughts on the Fury Wilder Joshua Pulev scenario?
I don't know where you left off because
I've already given my thoughts about it. So, I think that a tune-up, he does decent numbers. I think that he would take $10 million, but that $10 million check is not happening. And then you have to also imagine whatever millions that Pulev would be inclined to. That money is not going to come up in this climate right now. It's just not.
No, I think a Joshua Pulev fight, make it now. I think you'll get some DAZN subscribers back in just to watch Joshua because there's no other sports going on. I think that makes sense for them. I don't want to say it's an easy fight, but it's a fight Joshua definitely wins, right? I mean, Pulev's good, but Joshua beats him.
And you have to imagine, obviously, it would be nice to know from the UK's perspective and to have Rob here. Maybe he's listening to the show, but I got to imagine Sky's hurting for content. It's at least Sky Sports. I imagine they're hurting for content. So they would love an AJ fight right now. Let's be quite honest. All the networks, all the promoters, all the corporations that can make money off of that fight, they absolutely want these events to keep going in some haphazard way. We've seen that with this last week and last night as well with the UFC. So Sky, DAZN, and on top of that, obviously the respective promoters, yes, they want these fights to go ahead as much as possible.
So I think we'll get that. And then after that, I don't know. I don't know what Wilder and Fury do next, but I think you definitely get Joshua Pulev in the relative near future. I think that's next for both of them. And I think it'll happen, summer, early fall, something like that. But we definitely get that fight.
Since I've been mentioning a couple times, I just want to talk about the whole UFC events that's been happening the last few weeks and the bleed-over effect into boxing and how it can affect boxing. Obviously, on top of it, we've had Dana White and Steven Espinoza sort of go at it over this very interesting non-disparagement clause in UFC contracts, and that they made the media signed. A lot to get into with that aspect. Maybe me and Gary can rant about, but digressing slightly. Gary, thoughts on the past UFC event or 2 UFC events since we had one last night as well, and the cues that the boxing world are taking from the UFC and MMA right now?
See, I think it's wait and see. People don't start showing symptoms of the virus for 5 or 6 days. I think it's just wait and see. If everything goes well, this is what we'll do. If there's massive, outcry about the event, then we're not going to do that. You know what I'm saying? Baseball and football are coming up with ways to have events without fans. Mm-hmm. I think this was a step in that direction. I think, this was the guinea pig. People are going to look and see how this turns out. If everything goes well, if there's no massive outbreak, if everything is as safe as it was, then this is the blueprint. But I think for now, people are waiting to see the feedback they get.
I think that it's interesting because we had a fighter test positive for coronavirus for this last weekend, right? For the UFC, and the fight get canceled. We've seen on the screen itself. Like we've seen it live on live television, them not adhere to their own coronavirus protocol. So it's gonna be interesting to see, like you said, the fallout, because it is such a what's the term? Delayed reaction or delayed response from the coronavirus in terms of when you get affected to when you show signs of symptoms. So I think maybe you're right in some aspect that in maybe 2 weeks of time, let's say that all these fighters, there's a lot of feedback. I don't know what's happening. Thank you for muting yourself. I assume if something happens in 2 weeks or a week from now, where we start hearing about all these cornermen and fighters and refs all start getting it in this sort of spillover effect. Yes, you see all these plans that promoters are having because of the UFC change those plans rapidly now. But then again, we saw the reaction from combat sports fans, largely speaking, kind of said, let's see the games begin anyways. You know, like even with the fighter testing positive, I saw tons of fans wanting the blood, lust to go on, so to speak, right? So I don't know. I don't know, even if we do see a major fallout from a actual infection standpoint, that has an actual real effect on how these promoters, these corporations react. The only time they reacted was when government control came down on them, was when literal senators and governors were calling up heads of the corporation, aka Disney, and saying, hey, you gotta shut it down. Right? That's when things change. But now they're in Florida. It's a different ballgame in Florida. It just is. I don't see DeSantis backing down in any way. I don't see Georgia backing down in any way either, if they want to go to Georgia either. The way Michigan is looking right now, it's not looking too good, or Wisconsin or Minnesota. Like there's certain states that they're forcing reopening. Supreme Courts of these states are saying that stay-at-home orders are illegal. Like I can see, even with a fallout, like you said, Gary, it doesn't change a lot. And in July, when a lot of these fights are talking about, the Shakur Stevenson fight we're going to talk about, the Povetkin and Dylan White fight we've been talking about for a while, those fights will still go on somehow. They will find a way.
If you remember, Top Rank was going to go through with the Mick Conlon fight on St. Patrick's Day and the Shakur Stevenson fight, which was like 2 or 3 days later. And then they said, okay, we'll do it, no fans. And then New York State finally stepped in the day before the Conlon fight. I think it was the first one, and said, no, this is off. This is not happening.
And quickly, credit to you, Gary, because I remember right around that time, I gave a lot of praise to Bob Arum for being a little more outspoken about the pandemic and reacting to it. And you were, I think, the one to say, like, whoa. He was going to put those cards on no matter what. The state and city had to come down on him. You're right. I think you're absolutely right. I think even the platitudes of Bob Arum right now are kind of bullshit. Like, he will put on the Shakur Stevenson fight in Vegas if the city and the state allow it. And his fighter will say yes. 100%.
The one thing that could stop it, right? If you put on an event, and let's say draws a crowd, right? You put it on in front of people, and a virus breaks out. I'd imagine you're susceptible to a lawsuit. And what if 100 people get the virus out of the 10,000 there? You just got a class action lawsuit from 100 people. You ain't going to let people back in. You know what I'm saying? Like, you might have to learn the hard way, but like, that's for real. Like, that's why baseball and football say, like, let's do this with no fans to control outbreaks. You know, we can test the players. Realistically, you can't test 50,000 fans at a baseball game or a football game to see if they have a virus, right? No. That's not realistic. But you can test the combatants and the officials. Like, you can.
Maybe this is a good time to digress back to this point, because, I mean, the UFC added in contract clauses and made third-party independent media sign this clause as well. Not only their contractors, people they're paying. Independent media, they had signed this. You know, I will imagine, or I will assume, that a lot of these promoters and networks are looking at clauses and contracts to put in place to dissolve them of all liability.
This completely negates And look, I know we're not talking about real controversial things here, but this completely negates having a free press. Like, if you can't say anything disparaging, then you know what I'm saying? Like, what's the purpose of this? You can only say good things about me. So why don't you just tell me what to write? There's no purpose. Like, there's absolutely no purpose. If you're going to say I can't say anything bad, then I can't do my job. Maybe I'll only say good things. I don't know. I haven't been to the event yet. Maybe I can only say bad things. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you have to sign this. Like, that's like some dear leader North Korea stuff. Like, you'll say what I tell you to say.
It's nuts. When the fighter signed it, like, that was one thing, because obviously the UFC contracts are so restrictive compared to boxing. So, like, that was like, oh, wow. But they had the media signed it. And I'll be honest, like, I know boxing media, they will sign it in a heartbeat too. Like, let's just be honest about it. You think your favorite YouTube channel is not going to sign this clause to get some clicks? No, they will. I'm telling you. So it's just, look, even though you're partially right in the term that, like, in an idealistic sense, these promoters and networks in some aspect, and also the venues, are somewhat liable for putting on these events right now during a pandemic when there's stay-at-home orders and such. But if they're in states where those stay-at-home orders don't exist, and they have all these people that are attendance there for working sign this clause or sign non-disparagement clauses or non-liability clauses, etc., that dissolves them of all responsibility and liability. I think that happens. I think we've seen it. Like this last week and this coming up few weeks is a sign of that. We have June hitting. I think we have. Do we have boxing back in June or July? I think July, right, is the first official big cards back. It's not long till these cards are back in place and we see, regardless of outcome, them force through content. I mean, do you see that not happening? Do you see Las Vegas or Florida or whoever come in saying, you know what, this is getting out of hand here? I don't. I think the adults in the room have left.
I don't know what you're gonna get, right? Like, I don't know if you threw an event, if you'd pack it out, if people would step back and say, I'm not going to this, right? And if you got an event, and God forbid it sold out, and a virus went around, you open yourself up to a lawsuit. Like, there's a lot. Like, you're gonna have a really high-paid lawyer and medical team, like, looking into this and seeing the safety of this to see if it's going to end up being profitable for you, or if you're going to put yourself at risk long-term of the medical costs and the lawsuits that could result from this. I don't know. Like, there's real short-sighted would say, yeah, let's do it and let the chips fall where they may. But, like, a smart person might say, okay, look, here's what you get. Here's the upside of having a crowd. Here's the downside. Do you still want to take that? I don't know what the downside is, but, like, people smarter than me can figure that out, I would think.
Do you see that quote from Dana White basically saying that he asked his lawyers to find ways around all this shit so he can put on events still? I was like, oh, that's...
If you can figure out a way to do it, it's not illegal, right? Like, if you can...
That's an ethics question for lawyers in law school right there, right? Oh my fucking God, man. And you are, like, partially right that, like, this isn't national crisis level news, right? So to speak. You know, the UFC putting on an event, a boxing promoter putting on an event. But at this point in time, it is deadly. Like, it is deadly serious, at least, right? I'm not joking. Like the idea that a fighter can catch something and then in 14 days, the amount of people he is in contact with and the amount of people that they are in contact with in the next 14 days, all without knowing that they're infected, is a massive, massive concern. Especially even when your precautions are, look, we're going to have these fighters isolated, we're going to test them, and then they're going to fight, and then we're going to be in quarantine, then they're going to go. When you don't adhere to that protocol, then it doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't matter that you test them. It doesn't matter that the UFC is doing 1,000 or 1,500 tests this week. If all of your fighters are in contact with each other's fighters, all of their cornermen, no one's wearing a mask, no one's wearing PPE gear, and on top of that, the fighter that is the fighter that was infected was not actually placed in quarantine, then you have big concerns here. Major concerns here. And then the second card, which was last night, when you have a fighter that fell off the card due to sickness, but it wasn't coronavirus, he wasn't in quarantine. Like, what are you doing here? Like, and again, if you're signing all these clauses that absolve you of liability, then of course they're not going to follow this fucking blueprint that they've laid out. It's just smoke and mirrors. It's the WBC clean boxing program all over again in a more macro sense, right? It's hey, we're doing something. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You know, like we're fixing the issue. Here's our list of rules. We're not following them, but here's our list of rules. And who's keeping you accountable to those rules? Oh, we are. We're keeping ourselves accountable. Sure, Dana. And it goes back to where you're at with these fights. You're talking about Florida. That's not the greatest commission. Not the greatest state when it comes to intelligence, let's say. Sorry. In terms of its leaders right now, let's just be fucking honest about it. There's smart people in Florida. It's just not your leadership right now, or the commission.
There are smart people in Florida, right? There just seems to be inordinate, a disproportionate amount of stupid people in Florida. I was like, it's a state of 20 million people. I'm sure there's plenty of smart people of that 20 million. It just seems to be a proportionate amount of not so smart people.
And then you have Las Vegas, who, I mean, its entire city is predicated off of exploitation and just money, right? And like that's boxing through and through. So I don't see Las Vegas or the Nevada Commission, a commission that famously allowed Floyd Mayweather to have a fight with Miguel Cotto before going to prison for domestic violence. I don't think that they're going to stop these cards from happening.
And they sanctioned a fight for Floyd Mayweather to fight a guy who had never fought before in a 12-round fight. Right? Like, if you had a guy who'd never fought before and said, I want to sanction him for a 12-round fight, the commission would laugh at you. It's like, no, you're getting 4 if he passes all the physicals. No, I want 12. You're not getting 12. But, you know, there was money to be made, so they made the fight.
Reminder, they couldn't get Triple G Munguia.
But McGregor in a 12-round fight, no, that's fine.
Fine, totally fine. No big deal. Crazy. Speaking of crazy, remember when Bob Arum was like, "Hey, no one, everyone is disposable, so to speak, right? Like we don't need you in this pandemic. If you don't want to fight, you're fine, right?" And he kind of said it. Rob interpreted it a little more of a malicious way. I interpreted it as a little bit more of a Bob Arum just being a cranky Bob Arum way. But I like how, because of that, you have Todd DeBuff now out there saying, no, we want Crawford to come back as soon as possible. We love Crawford. Crawford's our fan. We love Crawford. I just want to point out that's quite hilarious quickly. Demetrius Andrade also saying, I looked forward to fighting Golovkin at one point, not anymore. Another example of Andrade not knowing what the fuck to do. You have a legit star in your division, in your promotional stable and network stable, and you're saying, I don't want to fight him anymore.
God, that's a money fight. Embarrass him. Call him out every day. That is such a makeable fight. Eddie, your promoter wants to make that fight. Call him out. Embarrass him. Make fun of him every day. Right? Get the fight.
Like, why would Andrade say this? Like, Andrade is that person at school that like thought he was the coolest fucking shit, right? But
no, he's the kid that goes, Mrs. Caffrey, you forgot to give us homework. You're supposed to give us homework.
No, that's not him. No, let me finish. He's the guy that thinks he was super cool and like wore like those 3-button collared shirts, right? Always wore his Letterman, but the dude was clumsy as hell and like semi-nerdy. But like he wanted to be super cool. And it's like, Andrade, like just be yourself, man. Like stop like putting on an act. Like it's the same thing with him putting on like a Mel Gibson Patriots Day fucking costume. Okay. It's like, dude, what are you doing? Like it's just, you're trying too hard. He's trying too hard. And this is him right here trying to be too cool for school. Like, I don't need Golovkin. I'm cool. But yeah, he calls out Billy Joe Saunders again. What the fuck you doing? Shout out to Andrade.
He's got a beef with Charlo and Triple G. Like, call out Triple G until it's not available anymore, and then call out Charlo. But Triple G's the biggest money fight on that list. Obviously, you want Canelo. That doesn't look like it's going to happen. So let's just go right at the Triple G. That's the next biggest fight. It was like back in the day, if you couldn't get Floyd, you wanted Pacquiao. And I'm not calling anyone else out. Like, why don't these guys do that? That's the money fight.
I don't know, man. I don't know why there's no one in his ear telling him to do that. Right? And the funny thing is, he did that with Charlo at 154. He followed him at press conferences. He barked at him behind the scenes all the time, and there's always video of it. Like, we saw that, and it always made us hype for that fight. And then Charlo went to 160. Andrade followed him, and then they just decided not to talk at each other ever. Andrade decided to be more laid back. I just don't know what his goal is. Like, I don't know what his strategy is here, because he is not the guy that's going to just naturally get the big fights. There are certain fighters that are just beloved by the promoter, by the network. They're just naturally a draw, so they're put in situations more than others because they make the promoters more money. Andrade's not that guy. He's never been the favorite by any promoter. Obviously, he had massive promotional issues and management issues back in the day. He's never been a draw in anywhere, even his home fucking town. So he has to do something extra. And that's just the unfortunate truth here if you want to get the big fights. Otherwise, you go the mandatory route and hope that gets you something. Right? You be the quiet warrior that works up the ranking to get the mandatory spot, and you wait till you get your shot. That you can't do a half-ass either or, and that's kind of what Andrade is doing. And it's weird. I'm always frustrated by the guy because he's extremely talented, and I think he should be getting these big fights. But he kind of shoots himself in the foot all the time, except for maybe the Billy Joe Saunders situation, when he's about to get those big fights. He steps off the gas pedal every time.
Billy Joe's a big fight, but it's not like Triple G. You're not going to have casual eyes on a Billy Joe fight. You're going to have some casual eyes on a Triple G fight.
No. You're of course right. I'm not comparing them as a one-to-one analog of Triple G and Billy Joe Saunders as an opponent, but Billy Joe Saunders would have been his best opponent to date from
by a mile.
Talent, athletic perspective, achievement perspective. It would have been his best win if he beat Billy Joe Saunders.
His best opponents to date are Vanes Martirosyan 7 years ago
on HBO.
And that's it.
Yeah, that's about it. His biggest win at 160 is Silitsky.
I mean, it's a good name. It's a good win, but I mean, nobody cares about Silitsky. I think it's a good win. But no one cares about that.
Quickly, I want to give a quick shout out to Scott Brown with a monster super chat. Really appreciate that, man. Really do. And I'll be honest, when I read that, I thought you said Ted is looking to run from Loma, and I was super confused. And then I squint my eyes. It said T.O. looking to run from Loma. No, I don't think Teofimo Lopez is running from Loma at all. I think he's kind of right in saying that I'm not fighting Loma until things are we can have a crowd. We can have this big fight because it's supposed to be my big coming out party. That's what it's supposed to be. I'm not having my big coming out party during a pandemic when no one's really watching, so to speak.
Yeah, he's hedging on himself. You'd imagine that fight would be at Madison Square Garden, which is his home city.
Or L.A., which is still a big market.
Sure. You want to do that in front of a crowd, in front of as many people as possible. He's also hedging on himself. He's taking a gamble. Loma could get picked off by someone else, and then you lose the moment, right? I don't think that'll happen, but it could. But he's saying, I'll get this fight. It kind of the same way I felt about Caleb Plant. He's I'm not going to fight Canelo on a short camp. All right, you're betting on yourself. I think that that fight, the Teofimo Loma fight will happen, and I think it'll be a big event when it does. And I don't think they're going to put anything in. I don't think you're going to get a Haney fight with Loma in the interim. I don't think you're going to get anything that really puts that fight in jeopardy. You know what I'm saying? They both might take a fight, but I don't think it's going to be anything where they could lose. They're not going to take a big time opponent.
The issue comes when, let's say, they're waiting for things to clear up a little bit to have some sort of fight and to have some sort of makeshift crowd, like what they did in Nicaragua, right? Where everyone's spaced out. But I think when it's going to be weird when we hit let's say August, September, and shit's not getting better. What do they do then? Because with Wilder Fury, that's one of those fights where the gate revenue is such a large aspect to the revenue of that fight that they don't want to make it without having the gate revenue secured in some aspect, whether through some other avenue or you have a gate revenue again because you have attendance there. Loma Lopez is a very small scale version of that, obviously, for the lightweight division. The gate for that fight, in theory, would be quite a bit and would help pay off the purses for those fighters. So you would need that gate revenue, or, like I said, time and time again, a bigger check from the network to offset that loss. And that's why we're hearing every other athlete in the world say, like, we're not playing right now because our contracts that they've been talking about. I think it was a baseball player was out there talking about how negotiations to restart the league. They were talking about doing half a season, something like that, right? And he was like, "Fuck that! I'm not doing that. I'm gonna get paid half. On top of that, I don't get paid more, and this is like hazard pay in my mind. No, I'm good. I'm gonna sit out here and just wait." I think a lot of fighters who are banking on themselves, like you said, are thinking that way, to be honest. The fighters that are hurting for cash are going to be doing this. And then, like we're going to talk about shortly, is Shakur Stevenson. He's been fighting no ones lately, so him fighting another no one doesn't hurt him, and he gets another check.
The owners in Major League Baseball are going to have to take a loss here for this season. And, a complete loss or a mitigated loss. But look, that's what happens, right? Like, in baseball, in football, it's different, right? Because football careers are so short that the union doesn't have much power because the only thing the players care about is get me every single penny you can because my career on average is 2.5 years. In baseball, it's a lot different, right? Like, careers are long. You don't have injuries. You don't have all the salary cap rules. Like, careers are longer. So there's more negotiating room for the union, right? So the union is going to get you a better deal than just make every surrender to get you every last penny. So, like, okay, the players have taken some concessions in the past, and now the owners are going to have to take a loss. Like, that's just the way it's going to have to be. Like, it sucks for them, and they're smart too. They're billionaires, most of them, right? Well, they're all billionaires, I would imagine. I'd imagine most of them are smart, so they'll figure a way to mitigate the loss. But they're going to take a loss here. Like, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Same with the NBA. That's why their union is super strong because their seasons or averages is a lot longer than the NFL.
The NBA is so international, they can kind of mitigate things, right? Like, I think they can put games overseas and stuff. Baseball is like, if you put baseball in France, nobody cares, right? No one's going to go to it. You put an NBA game in France, people are going to like that. You put it in Argentina, right? They're going to like that. You put baseball in Argentina, they're like, where's the soccer ball? Like, baseball doesn't have the international appeal that basketball does.
Yeah, or that basketball has built over the last 30 years, especially. I mean, it's been a huge swing in terms of basketball's influence worldwide with Jordan, Kobe, etc. Speaking a little bit about Andrade, LFC in the chat saying Liam Williams would put it on Andrade. I kind of agree that that's going to be a really tough fight for Andrade. I think Liam Williams is grossly underrated, and he's also been talking a lot of shit to Andrade, so I like that. Let's move on. Speaking of that Shakur Stevenson fight, let's talk about it. Mike Coppinger over at The Athletic reporting, sources, boxing back. I was wrong. June 9th. I was right earlier, actually, I should say. June 9th, Shakur Stevenson, Rafael Rivera on ESPN in Las Vegas. I thought I said July 9th. Misread it. Sorry. Gary, I mean, we're about, 4 weeks away from this, right?
Yeah, less
than a month. So thoughts about the first world championship fight back in the U.S. and it's Shakur Stevenson versus Rafael Rivera.
I can't believe it.
Quickly, for people who maybe not remember him, he fought Leo Santa Cruz, I want to say like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago.
He's fought Joet Gonzalez and Jojo Diaz too. He's been used a lot as step-up opponents. He got his big shot against Santa Cruz. He went the distance. I don't think he's ever been stopped. I'm sure someone can fact check me, but he's been in there with good competition. Mm-hmm. He hasn't done well. He's lost every fight, and outside of the Joet Gonzalez fight, he's lost wide. But he's, he is what he is. He's a gatekeeper. I think this is largely what you're going to get. Like I said, you got Shakur Stevenson. You could probably pay him a little less, and you found someone who will take the fight. They're probably paying him peanuts, but he's got to take it because he's got, You know what I'm saying? He's got no other choice. And if he doesn't take it, they'll just go down the line. I can't believe Rivera, who I don't think is a terrible fighter, is ranked in the top 15. Otherwise, it couldn't be a title fight, right?
Dude, it's sanctioned bodies, man.
I guess they found someone and I was like, hey, rank this guy 15.
I mean, that's sanctioned bodies. When it comes to their ranking, just like nothing is shocking. And I've seen a lot of people have this debate online about, oh, these coronavirus fights are gonna be shit, and that's like partially true. Obviously, we've been talking about that for a long time. But then again, like, do you guys remember Shakur Stevenson's original fight in March? You guys remember who he was supposed to fight?
Mariaga?
Yeah. So it's not like he's fighting a worse opponent in my mind. Rafael Rivera is kind of like a Mariaga to me.
It's a level.
Absolutely. It's a tough guy that's going to take a beating, and that's about it. So
he will mount no offense against Shakur Stevenson, just to put that. I don't think Rivera's a terrible fighter. I think he's a fine gatekeeper, right?
I think gatekeeper is a more respective term in boxing, at least it should be. And Rivera's not that. He's below that, in my opinion. He's less than a gatekeeper. He's more of that just regional guy you throw on undercard, so to speak, that's been used as a tune-up for a lot of big names. More of a journeyman. He's probably closer to a journeyman status, honestly, than he is a gatekeeper. At least he will be probably by the end of his career.
Yeah, because his record's still not bad now. It's probably like 20-something and 4 losses, right? And all those 4 losses are the good fighters. But you're right. He'll be used a bunch more, and the next thing you know, he'll have 12 losses.
Yep, that's exactly what happens. But back to my point, I've seen a lot of debate about, like, this fight being shit or not because of coronavirus. I think in some aspects, some fights will be diminished. Some matchups will be ruined because of the pandemic. But also, this is kind of par for the course for Shakur Stevenson and some promoters. So it's not really the coronavirus for this instance, in my opinion. Just want to point that out. I've seen a lot of people get defensive about this and all that shit. It's like, no, Shakur Stevenson would fight shit opposition again. Why? Because that's all he's been fighting. If he was out there fighting great competition over and over again, like Sean Porter, all of a sudden he took, like, I don't know, like a Sammy Vasquez off of a 5-year layoff. I'm like, whoa, that's weird. And obviously Sammy needs the check. He hasn't been fighting for 5 years. He might need it now during this pandemic. Like, that's what it would look like, obviously. Shakur Stevenson fighting no-name oppositions, in my opinion, is kind of par for the course.
Because he's still a prospect, even though he's got a world title.
He is, man. He is. We're going to talk about other prospects coming up in a bit, like Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney. And it's just funny seeing them bicker. I find it quite hilarious. Before we get to that, Gervonta Davis, Leo Santa Cruz. Sources, I want to say this is Mike Coppinger. Yes, Mike Coppinger, not Lance Bugmeyer. Sources, Gervonta Davis, Leo Santa Cruz pay-per-view fight for the fall. Showtime pay-per-view at 130 pounds per the sources. Gary, thoughts on particularly those two aspects? Because we kind of knew this fight was going to happen regardless at some point. We didn't know what weight class and what network. Now we know it's Showtime pay-per-view and 130. At least that's what it's being rumored right now. Thoughts on those two aspects at this point?
Tank Davis ain't making 130. We can dismiss that right now. He's coming in at 133, 134. He struggled to make 135. And perhaps it was that last-minute weight cut that made him look so bad in that fight. I don't know that, right? But he did not look good in that fight. He looked drained. Like, it looked like there was something wrong with him. So he may have drained himself to make 35. He ain't making 130. I mean, this fight will happen. I just don't know if it's going to be at 130, 135, or catch weight, because Tank ain't making 130. I can promise you that. But, it's a good fight. I wish Tank would fight a lightweight, but, it's a fight we wanted. A little late. Really late, but it's a good fight. I don't know how it's going to do in pay-per-view, but
I think about 150K is probably about the over and under.
But that's bad, though, isn't it? Like, the networks don't want that. Like, Showtime, it's Showtime pay-per-view, right?
Yes.
So they don't want 150. They like 2.25 is kind of like
that number that they want. That's the network over and under that they're looking. That's their break-even point. I'm saying my prediction, the over and under is 150. Okay.
No, I agree with your prediction, but that's probably right. I mean, I can't see it doing more than that.
And also at 130, are we picking Leo Santa Cruz? Because I'm picking Leo Santa Cruz. I've never been a big Leo like fan, thinking that he's like the next greatest Mexican fighter of all time. But at 130, and the way Gervonta is looking lately, I might pick Leo. He's gonna win decision.
I've gone back and forth on this. You taking Leo?
Yeah, I'll take Leo at 130.
I'll take Tank. I'm a flip of a coin on it. I'll take Tank. I'm totally 50. I could see the guy winning. I'll take Tank.
Yo, dude, Gamboa was able to put combinations and volume on Gervonta Davis.
Miguel Flores was able to put combinations on Leo Santa Cruz.
Good points. Good points. All good points. All good points. Good rebuttal.
I could see.
You're right. Leo didn't look spectacular at 130. He looked a little bit overweight, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like he didn't. Same as like was it Linares at 140? Like he looked a little bit chubby at 140. You know what I mean? Like he just didn't look like he was thinned out like in prime.
That's just Linares not wanting to make weight anymore. Like that's all that was. Like I'm not cutting weight. It wasn't like he built up and bulked up a little bit and got lean. He's like, I'm just gonna cut 5 less pounds. Like
yeah, and it showed. It really did show. Speaking of the lightweight division, though, and the prospects and all that fun stuff, let's talk about Ryan Garcia calling out UFC double champion, now retired, air quotes, retired champion, Henry Cejudo, who fought this last weekend. And on top of it, Devin Haney getting involved because Linares got involved. Linares basically said, I'm not talking much, but I'm waiting for the contract to fight with you, spoiled child. Linares talking shit to me is just hilarious. I've met him so many times. He's so friendly. That's definitely not him typing that. And then Haney is saying, if Princess Ryan pussies out, I'll fight you. It's just, and on top of it, like Abner Mara is getting like really involved as well. I don't know, Gary. Thoughts on the Ryan Garcia? Well, let me try to get this straight. Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney, Jorge Linares, Henry Cejudo, and Abner Mara's situation that we have here.
where is Hector Tanahara?
Yo, I don't know.
He's got to speak up because he can get a Ryan. Look, I don't know if a Linares fight is realistic. I know that's the one we all talked about, but can Linares get into the country because he doesn't live here? Like I'm being realistic.
They were talking about that being an issue.
Right. So, I mean, we all assumed that the July 9th fight is Linares, but why would we, other than Oscar said it was going to happen, but like things have changed. All right. Tanahara is possible. You know, why? Hector, you're my boy. Make some noise. Like, he's calling everyone out. Call him out. You've called him out before. Do it again. Like, you can get that fight now.
I'm curious. Has he called him out and no one's paid attention?
He called him out when they fought in the Virgil Ortiz.
No. I mean, like, during this. Like, it'd be really funny if we can go find a Hector Tanahara tweet from, like, May 11th, right, during all this shit, and there's, like, 1 like on it. Just saying, it's possible. And you just forgot about it. Yeah, that's possible. That's 100% likely. I think you're right, though. I mean, I know you're a Tanahara fan. If you're thinking of how should he worm his way in here, to use that sort of weird term, he needs to start speaking up. Someone's like Andrade. Like, you're not the guy that's going to be favored by the promoter. So push yourself into the conversation. Make yourself part of the headline, because your promoter is not going to put you there. And if people don't know, promoters are often, and managers are the ones putting stuff out there to the media. So if your name's not in headlines all the time, it's because your promoter is not out there talking to media people and putting your name in the headlines. So you have to do it yourself. And he's not doing that here. Absolutely. But thoughts on Ryan Garcia versus Henry Cejudo, UFC champion in boxing. Thoughts on Ryan Garcia versus Abner Mares, because Abner Mares wants to fight Ryan Garcia now. And him saying that Uncle Al will allow it, I believe is what he said. Or Mr. Al, I forget how he called him. And then we have Haney saying that he'll fight Linares, and Eddie Hearns saying that that's a good idea. Like, thoughts on what's going to happen out of this lightweight soup?
Well, if Linares can come to this country As he's allowed in, and he's allowed to fight here. I would imagine that he's fighting Garcia. So I don't know. He's not fighting Haney. If he fights at all in the U.S., he's fighting. He's fighting Garcia. So
and maybe Oscar's thinking during this pandemic, I don't want to pay for the travel and the safety precautions of a Linares and Linares team.
Okay.
And then I'll make him fight some tune-up in July, and you have Eddie Hearn swoop in with a Devin Haney and Linares fight.
Have him fight. Look, obviously,
Just mapping out how that could happen.
the important people are listening because once we said Wilder should get asked for a $10 million step aside, he came out and asked for $10 million. So obviously, important people are listening. Okay, so important people, make Tanahara versus Garcia. When Tanahara wins, Garcia is still a star because of his movie star looks and his personality. He's still a star, so don't worry about that. Now you have another star in Tanahara, and then you can make the Haney fight, and you can make these other fights, and you have place to negotiate from because he just beat Ryan Garcia. That's the fight you want to make: Tanahara versus Ryan Garcia. Make that fight. It's easy to make. It's in house. You don't have to go jump through hoops getting people into the country. They're both American. They're both here. And then you have that Texas versus California beef that me and Matt can go back on. Like, make that fight makes so much sense. And whoever wins, you win, right? Let's play make-believe and say Garcia wins good. He's got a good win. Tanahara wins. Now you have a new superstar.
Okay, Gary. Tanahara is not in this soup. You have to stop mentioning him. Okay, he's not involved here. I'm sorry. I know that's your dream. But he's not one of the names that's sparking up here that's making noise. We have, let's throw out Henry Cejudo because that fight's not happening and no one wants to see it.
Has he boxed like the guy Clay Cash?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, he did. I think he boxed in the amateurs for a bit, and obviously he wrestled in the amateurs and won an Olympic gold medal in wrestling. But digressing from that, he's a decent striker too. But I don't want to see him fight Ryan Garcia. I don't care. He's 5'4". I don't care to see it. We have Ryan Garcia, Abner Mares, Jorge Linares, and Devin Haney. What combinations of names, what matchups do you like out of those four?
Haney versus Garcia, but that's not going to happen. So I would take Linares versus Garcia, and then Haney,
Abner Mares. Ooh.
I mean, I like the fight, but I don't want to see Linares. Mares would be so outsized in that fight. Like,
He would be outsized with Ryan too, I would say. Ryan's a big guy.
He is. And Mares isn't. Like, he was like stick to your own. He comes up in what, 18 or 15? Did he start at 15? Mares?
No, he didn't start. He didn't start.
Started at 18 then.
I think he started at 18.
18. Oh, okay. Like, yeah, 18. You're right. Bantamweight. Like going up to 35. That's like more than 10% of your body weight. Like, you're not that big. Those guys are big. And I like Mares. That's why I don't want to see him do it. Like,
what's a bigger fight, Mares or Linares?
Mares. I think maybe that's just because I'm a
It's hard, right? Because you're in a division where Mares doesn't have history in. So like his 122 run doesn't matter as much, right? Like his 126 run doesn't matter as much. Because now he's 2 divisions higher than those divisions, or 3 divisions higher, respectively. And on top of it, I mean, honestly speaking, like Linares and Mares aren't that different from a technical perspective. Just one's bigger and faster, but has a weaker chin. I would argue, like that's the really only big distinctions between them. Mares might have he's probably been in bigger fights more consistently than Linares. But then again, Linares was hyped up like no other person that we've seen for some time. I mean, I hyped him up. I'll be honest. Like I overhyped him.
Career. Like we all hate on Linares. He's had a good career. I mean, maybe it wasn't what we all thought it was.
Absolutely.
But he was good.
Yeah. And Mares kind of fits that boat too. Like we thought he was going to be something truly special. And he kind of just had a really good career, but just really good.
Yeah. But he gave you really exciting. Like Mares was in Wars, which is kind of like
the difference.
Yeah.
The difference. Yes. Like I said, Linares has the weaker chin. Like exponentially so. He has the weaker chin. Let's be honest.
How about Mares versus Linares and Garcia versus Haney?
Yeah, I'm all right with that. I do like the idea of like the younger fighters fighting the older fighters. Like I do like that concept.
I do too, but Mares is not that weight class though. Has Mares Fought at 130?
I agree that Mars probably shouldn't be the name we're talking about here. Like, it should be more of like a Dennis Shafikov or something like that.
That'd be great, man. Let's do that. But they don't want that. Shafikov stuff his helmet. They don't want that. Even if you win, you went through hell.
He hasn't fought in a few years. So, I mean, you're going to catch him on a layoff. He was a guy that went to 132, so he's kind of a smaller dude. But a veteran of the division. You know, like, that's who I would be looking at. Same with like a Fortuna, who I've been talking about forever. Like, guys that have been around for a bit. If you're a prospect that's largely been untested against actual sort of credentialed fighters, so to speak, then I want you to fight those guys instead of fighting other unnamed prospects, or not no-name prospects or unnamed prospects, but other prospects that really haven't established themselves within the division. Like Morris said, like that was Morris' big point about like Ryan Garcia's out there talking about fighting a UFC fighter. He hasn't even established himself in his own division. That's absolutely true. Like, these fighters are talking about fights that don't make sense sometimes when they should be talking about an Abner Mares, an Linares. Like, those are names that they should be talking about more. Or Richard Comey now coming off a loss, like, you know, or Dan Shafikov, or where's Latishanin at? Where the fuck is he at? Go pick up a win over him. He was a big name for a while, a big hipster darling. Pick that win up. You know, like, beat someone that we know that's been established in the division, not people that have also not been established.
But Oscar largely doesn't care either, so he's got like, well, who can you get me? All right, that's fine. You know, like, that's where we are with Golden Boy in 2020.
Oscar's not really steering the ship, in my opinion. If I'm guessing here, right? It's Eric Gomez is running the day-to-day operations of Golden Boy, if I'm assuming.
I would hope Oscar's not steering the ship. Like, let's get the sober person driving, you know?
But then again, if it is Eric Gomez, not the greatest job so far. I just want to point that out. Chase Athletics, another great names. Hank Lundy, Steven Ortiz. Agree. Those are good veterans that have been around for a bit, especially Hank Lundy.
I like Hank Lundy because I want to see how Ryan does with a pure boxer like Hank Lundy, right? Like,
I think I've mentioned like guys like Ray Beltran before, though I think he's now at 140. Like, there's guys you can fight that have been in the mix for a while that are interesting names. Let's be honest. Gamboa, whenever he heals up, I think he's a great name.
He pulled out his Achilles at 38. I don't know if he's going to be back. I mean, maybe. Yeah. Because he didn't look terrible fighting Tank on a shot Achilles. Like, he didn't look terrible.
No, he didn't look bad at all. Let's be honest. Let's talk about our last topic of the day with a huge disclaimer of like allegedly and like apparently, and it's like those types of words and qualifications here before we talk about the Irish cartel. But Daniel Kinahan, a name that's been talked about for a while now in boxing. And in fact, we're going to play a clip from RTE1, one of the biggest news channels, I think the biggest news channel in Ireland, about Daniel Kinahan and his recent sort of connections to boxing and the news that's been in the news cycle lately. But
do you want to explain who his dad is first, or is Danny Kinahan, is he well known enough?
Okay. His father, I forget his father's name off the top of my head. What was that?
Christie.
Thank you. He started basically the Irish cartel, a big drug empire, moved it to Spain, and then passed away. I forget how long ago. And then Daniel took over the empire. And then he, for the last 4 or 5 years, let's say, has been trying to become a boxing promoter while still allegedly running a drug empire, Irish drug empire from Spain. I know it's a lot to wrap your head around. And honestly, the story they're talking about from 2016, I remember when that happened. I 100% remember hearing that story. I didn't connect the dots then because I was like new into the industry, and I didn't understand the ramifications of it. But holy shit, I remember the story, and it's all now making sense. I know in the UK they are very well known, so I know for our UK audience, Kinahan, MTK, and their relationship and connection or lack thereof or whatever, you guys understand it. But for us in the US, this is not something that we talk about or that's on our news ever. Like CNN is not talking about Daniel Kinahan and MTK. Like that just is not happening. So for half of our audience or half our listeners right now, this is something that they just aren't aware of. or maybe aren't fully understanding of the significance. So let's play this clip from RTE1, which is a news outlet in Ireland, and then we will pull up the recent news from Dan O'Keenan and where he is now living and his new sort of appointment in the Middle East. Let's play this clip.
Aram is one of the world's biggest boxing promoters. Here he is in a recent interview talking about a well-known Irish figure, Daniel Kinahan.
Well, Kinahan, he's one of my favorite guys. I've had the opportunity to meet him a couple of times.
There he is, Bob Aram. Nick, okay, so he's a big cheese in the boxing world and a big fan of Daniel Kinahan. Why?
Yeah, well, clearly, I mean, this has kind of come, there's been a bit of a drip feed of this for the last couple of months. Daniel Kinahan, if you remember, when he shot to international stardom was in 2016 when he was about to put on his own boxing bout here in Ireland called Clash of the Clans in at the weigh-in at the Regency Hotel. There was a shooting and David Byrne was murdered. It just sort of exploded into a huge big feud that is ongoing really in Dublin ever since.
That's the Hutch Kinahan feud.
The Hutch Kinahan feud, yeah.
How many people have been killed in that feud, Nicola?
18 people have been killed and 15 of those appear to have been killed at the bequest of the Kinahan side of that feud. His father actually set up the drug empire in Spain and he inherited it probably about 2 or 3 years before that Regency incident. But he really is somebody who, while he's inherited a massive big drug cartel, his ambition is to be a boxing promoter. And in a way that day in the Regency, that was taken from him. And shortly after the Regency Hotel incident, we were told it had been bought by a new investor, an independent woman called Sandra Vaughan. Daniel Kinahan had no longer anything to do with it. While he was the founder, he was stepping back and he was stepping aside. The business moved its headquarters from Spain to Dubai, where Kinahan was also resident at that stage. And now this interview is basically putting him firmly within that MTK stable. I think Bob Aram said he was a advisor to MTK, but that he is the man who is going to stage the biggest boxing fight of history, basically.
Now, MTK has said that he is not employed by them. I want to point that out quickly, that disclaimer. But he's also, via Sean Nam over at Boxing Today from USA Today, as one of their affiliates, in a sign of further solidifying his presence in the Middle East. Daniel Kinahan, the reputed cartel boss, founder of MTK, and according to Bob Aram, a top-ranked point person, is now an official advisor to a sports outfit owned by the Bahrainian. Anyways, royal family, per this press release. Daniel Kinahan named special advisor to KHK Sports. So, Gary, I'm just going to open the floor up to you, buddy, and let you have your thoughts about this, because your last name is on the screen. So you can, go for it, man. You can. I
don't know what would possess, like, Bob Aram to say such a thing.
To dry snitch. Come on, you just. But the thing is, like, we knew about this. He is a founding member of MTK to some aspect, even though he's not with them at all right now. We know that he's been talked about in the negotiations with AJ and Fury in the Middle East. We know that. We've seen him pictured with big-time boxing promoters. We know that he's done business with networks like BT and Sky. And while MTK can right now say, look, we don't pay him directly, he just advises fighters that he then brings to us that we manage. Look, you're all sharing the same pot of money in some aspect. So, like, it's a way to distance yourself that's not really there, in my opinion. It's like putting a piece of paper up between me and Gary and say, I'm not touching you. No, we're fucking touching, bro. Like, our arms are touching right now. Like, it's just because there's this flimsy piece of paper does not mean we're not touching. And therefore, these entities are touching, and they're profiting off of each other. And I'm not saying that they can't, because obviously, like, that's the government's job, and also that this isn't new, because Bob Arum has worked with dictators in the past, like Rumble in the Jungle, for instance. Just look up Zaire, for fuck's sake. And I'm just scared. I'll put that way, Gary. I am scared to mention any strong opinion right now. I'm just gonna say that.
Just don't say anything. I don't know what Bob Arum's relationship with them. I'm sure they have some type of working relationship where they know each other. If you ask me, I don't know. Who's that? Who? Never heard of him. Next question. Right? I mean, I don't know why you even. He's a good guy. I've talked to him, but just don't say anything. Right? It's like the Manziel. I don't even know Johnny Manziel's backstory, but like his dad is an oil baron who may or may not have killed off his partner, and now runs a cockfighting ring in East Texas.
I did not know that.
Yeah, he's got the Manziel has a. You can Google it. Like they have their own breed of cock. That's gonna sound weird. Of Bruce.
Yeah, that is. Dude, Rob is 100% clipping that out in our group chat.
They run cockfighting in Texas. Like the Manziel family. You just don't say anything, right? I don't know what they do. Maybe you've been to some of his events if that's your thing. We don't really talk about it, right? I mean, it's just kind of like the mafia. The mafia doesn't exist. What do you mean it doesn't exist? I don't know what you're talking about, right? Just shut up. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what possessed Bob Arum to say that on a major network. How does that even come? I don't know what you're talking about. That's all I would say is I don't know what you're talking about. Who? Never heard of him.
Dude, it's just every time. It's been a lot of instances lately where I think about that video I did about the top 5 scandals in boxing history. There's a lot more to the list that they just keep adding, I feel like. A Irish cartel leader being the centerpiece to the negotiations of, if not the biggest fight in boxing history, like the latest in RTU1, it's the biggest fight in British boxing history, and Joshua Fury. That's a major fucking news story. A guy that's been linked to, was it 18 murders that they said in Dublin? Holy shit. When I played that clip and she said that, I'm like, you know what? I'm glad Rob's not on this show, man. I'm glad. Let's just not say anything controversial. We love you, MTK. You guys put on great events. We love the Golden Contract Tournament. I have no other thoughts about this. This is just hilarious to me. It's boxing being boxing at its finest. Let's be quite honest. LFC saying, can't you guys remember when Connor started on some guy in the pub? Not the old man he punched. The guy he started on that was rumored to be linked with the Kinahans. Yes, I do remember that. Yeah. The second I started really researching this, the last day or two, I want to say. Last day. It was yesterday I was researching this. A lot of these stories came back into my memory, the Conor McGregor connection to the Kinahans and having a rift or rivalry with them to some aspect, which is fucking crazy. The whole 2016 story of a fighter being killed. I remember those stories 100%. I just did not connect the dots with MTK, with the history of MTK, with how involved Daniel Kinahan is. It wasn't really woven into the narrative as to how deep this goes in theory, and how little is kind of talked about, at least from the U.S. perspective. In the UK and in Ireland, maybe it is, but over here, it's just not. No one talks about this in U.S. boxing media or U.S. combat sports media or U.S. media. This Irish cartel is not talked about, period. End of story. Garrett, right? I mean, have you ever heard about them at all from CNBC or anything like that?
No, they never talked about them on CNBC. No, corporate NBC. No, I never talked about them.
Any other thoughts, Gary, on this topic or any other topics today, man?
I had to go back and listen to it 5 times. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It's I couldn't believe it. I was really? This is. I had to go look. We're talking about the same person here, right? Okay.
Yeah, it makes you go like, oh, remember Frankie Carbo in the 50s? Yeah, that's still happening. That shit's still happening today, which is fucking crazy.
Like, let's say Frankie Carbo's grandson, right? Grandson, let's say, was running the family now. And I don't know, Eddie Hearn or Al Heyman said, yeah, we have a good relationship. Good relationship. We work together a lot. He's a good guy. It's like, what?
You know how many red flags would go off right there?
You know what I'm saying? It's like, what? Like, and he was still active in, like, if Carbo was still active in the boxing world, like if he was like actively connected to PBC or Matchroom USA, it's like, yeah, he's a good dude. Like, we know him well. It's like, it's almost like hiring Victor Conti. You know, it's like we know what you're doing.
Yo, now Gary's potting right now. Way to go, Gary. Air horns for you. That was a great moment right there, Gary. God, red light district, man.
Yeah, like I gotta stop with this. I gotta stop with this boxing. It's too corrupt. I'm just gonna go back to the drug world.
Makes way more sense, man. It just does. Anyways, guys, that's gonna be it for today's show. We're gonna come back tomorrow, most likely, or on Saturday, depending how I'm feeling. I'll make a community post. I want some of you guys' questions and topics so we can dissect them as well. What else? That's about it. I'll have to check out the UFC 249 review show that I did with Anthony Walker on Saturday. That was a fun show and a really fun fights, honestly, even though obviously there's a lot to dissect about the morality of having fights right now when there's a global pandemic. But digressing from that point, it was a good card, even good fights yesterday on the UFC card. So go check them out. I was thinking about doing a review show last night, but I was just too tired from my vacation. What else? That's about it. Find me, Matt Hunter, MCR, on all social media platforms. Hit the like button, share the show, subscribe. Shout out to Scott Brown for the super chat. Really appreciate that, brother. And patreon.com/Mixed Combat Radio if you guys want to support the channel in any financial way from month to month. Gary.
Remember to hit that like and subscribe button. Follow me on all forms of social media, 3D Boxing, 3D Boxing blog. It's a good show today. Had some fun. It's good to be back. Hopefully we'll be back soon. From Texas to the world, thank you, and God bless.
Peace.